This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. This is such good shit. What do you guys want to talk about?
We're just chugging along through 2023, aren't we? Yeah, I had another one of those revelations the other day when I woke up and realized we're almost more than halfway through the year already. That's pretty mind-boggling. And a lot has happened this year in wrestling. Probably doesn't seem like much on the surface, but there have been a few promising things of note that have piqued my interest. You know, we talk about the bloodline stuff in WWE, and I mean, that's probably been some of the best material they dished out in years. But I even got a glimpse of hope the other week with that AEW Collision pilot. I thought, you know, if only that's what AEW could live up to 99% of the time. God, that would be such an easier show to watch. The sports-based wrestling organization that they claimed they were going to be from day one and decided to go in the polar opposite direction because, well, the elite. End of sentence. But we've got Punk back. We've got some promising things happening on the Saturday shows going forward. Dynamite is, well, did I mention Punk's back? And apparently not just exclusive to Collision either. Yeah, we'll cover that once we get to the Dynamite report in a minute. All in all, though, things aren't so bleak, right? I mean, I know I'm always the negative Nancy when it comes to the wrestling talk on the interwebs, but I mean, somebody's got to be here to balance things out, right? You know, especially when you got every wrestling media outlet telling you everything you see on AEW is sunshine, rainbows, and lollipops. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there watching it thinking, what universe am I living in compared to most wrestling fans? Am I really just that out of touch? Don't answer that. I think I know the answer. So, yeah. Remember when AEW had that really good Collision debut over the weekend? Well, scrap the trend of good shows, because it ended with one episode. We're back to Dynamite. And it is the literal definition of going from the Penthouse to the Outhouse. The AEW Collision, it lived up to the hype. It was the pro wrestling show. And a few days later, I turn into the Wednesday night show on Dynamite, and it's right back to the status quo. And that was even with the knowledge going in that we were basically going to get a bunch of spontaneous New Japan versus AEW tag team clusterfucks. So I even had time to mentally prepare myself for the idiocy. Before we dive into all that nonsense, though, I need to take a few minutes to talk about this opening match. If they advertised this on the Collision show ahead of time, I had completely neglected to remember any of it. It's Matt and Jeff Hardy versus the Ass Boys. And I'm going to halt the conversation right there so I can ask a question to anybody out there that's been watching Dynamite on a regular basis like me. Can anybody even recall the last time Jeff Hardy was on this show, period? I'm trying to think. The last time that I remember seeing Jeff Hardy on AEW Dynamite, I think it was the TV return, right? That segment where he just randomly came out to save his brother when he was getting jumped by the Firm. Does anybody even have any memory of that happening? That was months ago. And the Firm, to my knowledge, isn't even a faction anymore. That's how long it's been since Jeff was even booked to appear on the show in any on-screen capacity. Take out any random angles or pre-tapes he may have been involved with. He's never worked a match. He's never done one in-ring promo. He's just been on the shelf hanging around. I think he worked that pre-show match on the Double or Nothing pay-per-view, but again, did anybody even bother to watch that match, considering it was on the pre-show? It was probably just some random thrown-together tag match that they came up with at the last minute just to give Jeff something to do on pay-per-view. I don't even know how the hell this match came about, period. Have these teams been feuding? If so, would have been nice to maybe have been given some indication. A video package, an in-ring promo segment, something. And then there was the match. Whew. Ouch. Jeff Hardy, man. Yeah, now I'm thinking I know why they've been shielding him from appearing on the show. I don't know. We've definitely had this discussion before, but since it's been a while, I'll just go ahead and throw it out in the open again. Look, the Hardy Boys have history in wrestling, and if you grew up watching them as kids, they probably have a special place in your heart. Fine, whatever. But let's be authentic about this, okay? I've never been the biggest Hardy Boys fan growing up as a kid, but I'm not going to sit here and deny that they have a legacy. I'm not going to sit here and argue that they didn't make an impact in the business, because they certainly did, and it would be stupid for me to say otherwise. But does anybody honestly care to see the Hardy Boys wrestle anymore? I mean, Jeff has looked rough for a long time, and I didn't watch that pay-per-view match, but I heard he had a pretty bad showing there too. He wasn't horrifically bad or anything here, but the high spots, my God, the high spots. Losing his footing, trying to do that whisper in the wind move, running to hit the ropes like he had 50-pound weights in the bottom of his shoe. I mean, Matt's seen better days himself, but every time I watch Jeff wrestle at this point, he just looks like he's in a world of pain. And this is kind of on par with what I talked about in that MJF Adam Cole match the other week. The Guns are out there overcompensating for just about everything to try and make it a passable match. Overbumping, overselling, going the extra mile to try to bring some life and energy to it. And I can't fault them for it. In their defense, they didn't do a halfway bad job. Like I said, the match wasn't horrendous or anything. I just think they've long since overplayed their hand with the Hardy Boys experiment, bro. More accurately, Tony's overplayed his hand. I read somewhere after the show that Jeff is apparently going to be taking another hiatus from AEW. I don't know what that means. Hopefully it kind of puts to bed this notion that Jeff needs to be out there wrestling at any point. I mean, they blew their chance when they botched the potential Hardy Boys Beta Bucks confrontation the first night Jeff and Matt were seen together on TV. They could have done it. Instead, they wasted the Hardys in a bunch of underneath feuds with job guys that lasted like 8 weeks. The novelty quickly wore off. By the time we actually got the Hardys Bucks match on pay-per-view, too little too late. And the bloom was already off the rose with Jeff and what he was capable of doing in the ring. Now we're just retreading old ground in a desperate ploy to, I don't know, see if it pops a rating. I haven't checked. Whether or not it did, I don't think it really matters. the bottom line is Jeff looks old and broken down, and he probably shouldn't be wrestling at this stage. And even by the end of this thing, the Hardys weren't even the main talking point. They were more or less irrelevant. The finish to this saw Juicy Fruit run a distraction on the floor so the Guns could shove Jeff off the top rope. And after they hit their 310 to Yuma on Jeff and pinned him, that brought in Jay and Juicy to spend a minute or so beating up the Hardys. This somehow had ties to last week's show. I think that stemmed from when the Guns interfered on behalf of Jay White so he could steal a win on Ricky Starks or something. I'm a little hairy on the details. And we never get replay highlights on this fucking show, so I never remember what's going on half the time. But anyway, they're in there beating up the Hardys for a minute. And, point blank, they just sort of vanish. We do eventually get Ricky, FTR, and CM Punk joining the fray to send the heels powdering. But the Hardys, nowhere to be found. They just got swept up into the void, never to be seen again. So thanks for coming, boys. Glad knowing you. And for the record, the brawl itself got a big reaction, especially when FTR and Punk ran down. Dax and Cash were extremely over here, which is quite telling. It wasn't even the best brawl in terms of believability. Especially when they're out there milking the run from Punk at the very end, and you see the Guns just sort of hovering, and I can't even say they were laying on top of Dax. They looked like they were teabagging him. Like, they're not even attempting to throw punches or anything. They're just sort of lurking over Dax and raising their arms in the air like, I'm going to hit you. I'm going to do it. I'm just going to keep waiting until something happens. And then finally cue Punk so he can run out, and the heels are like, oh shit, now we're fucked. It was not visually impressive. I will say that. But, the madness didn't stop there. Because you had to figure, Punk's big return to Dynamite, even though his exact claim was, I don't even have to be here right now. But hey, what a genius idea. Give the guy a live mic so he could plug a match for Collision. Boom. Hell yeah. That's how you play the fucking political game the right way. Stick it to those prissy soy boy beta bucks. I'm going to use your Wednesday night Playhouse programming to advertise the real AEW wrestling show this coming weekend. Because that's where the money's at, bitch. What a clever programming tactic on Punk's part. Way to go, dude. That's a power play if I've ever seen it. Stick it to the man. And, now hey, gives me something to look forward to on the Saturday show. You remember on that Collision report I did on Monday, my biggest gripe at the end of that show was the fact that they didn't seem that they were promoting anything for the following week. Now we have a match set in stone, so good. Yes, it's another 8-man tag with Punk sort of working in the background, but it's 8 guys that know how to wrestle. At least you know it'll be professional and make sense. So, even if the Hardys and the Guns wasn't my cup of tea as an overall match, they ended hot. Plus, we got a big 8-man tag for the Saturday show. Fine. I'll take it. They've certainly come up with worse ideas for wrestling matches on this show. Take, for example, the next match. I had completely forgotten to comment on this when I saw the graphic flash up on the Collision show over the weekend. I remember seeing it. I put a thought in the back of my head. I'm like, do I do the rant now, or do I just sort of watch this match unfold on Wednesday and observe the stupidity there and save my rant for then? Well, yeah. In a Tupelo concession stand brawl, even though they weren't in Tupelo, Mississippi, and this company is about the farthest thing from Memphis wrestling on every level, and the fact that there was literally no justification for this being a concession stand brawl to begin with, beyond the fact that Tony's a mark and has no idea how to book. The match is Jeff Jarrett versus Mark Briscoe. The rare instances where we actually get to see Jeff and or Mark do singles matches on this show. And of course, the one time we do, it's against each other. And it's a fucking garbage match. I mean, there's a lot I could say about this. I could just spare you the horrific details and say it was everything you would come to expect on an episode of Dynamite. I mean, the only thing missing from this circus was the juggling bear. It was Mark and Jeff hanging out by two makeshift concession stand tables in the back. They had hot dogs and condiments and tables all set up for the boys to, do their thing. Hey, girl, do yo thing. They bumbled and fumbled around some furniture for a while. Jeff got mustard dumped all over his back. Karen was disguised as one of the ladies behind the stand so she could blindside Mark at one point. Apparently none of the other chicks figured it out when they were all just collectively standing there. It's also worth mentioning the idea that they're in the back fighting amongst a sea of fans. And of course, the moment the wrestlers start fighting through the crowd, everyone's just sort of lurking about, totally unconcerned about their safety. Everyone's smiling and waving at the camera, just casually clearing a path whenever the boys try to get through them. Because it's all a big show, right? We're all in on the gag. We know the shit's fake. Don't need to tell us twice. Of course, Mark ended up getting shoved off a ladder through a table by Sanjay. That was their commercial pitch. Because of course it was. And by the time they came back from break, the fight has now just casually spilled out into the ring where they're all ganging up on Mark. The heels were, I should say. I believe the situation was 5-on-1 advantage heels. Meanwhile, I keep sitting there wondering to myself, where the fuck are the rest of the locker room baby faces? Where's FTR? Weren't they immersed in a feud with this group for like 3 months? Where were they at? Does Mark Briscoe just not have friends? Is that what we're being led to believe? And lo and behold, right as that thought crosses my mind of where's some people to even the odds to help out Mark? Well, they came. We did get some baby faces clearing out to give Mark a hand. And they came in the form of the Lucha Fucks, Trent Beretta, and Chucky my fucking TV out the window Taylor. The best friends. Those Weasley fucking slapnuts. Yeah, they were the ones that ran out to make the save and send the heels powdering. Lovely. Glad to know that they made Mark's entire run in AEW a complete joke, just by mere association with this job crew. Finally, after having been subjected to this torture for the better part of 12 minutes, the finish is Mark Briscoe getting the win on Double J via Schoolboy. Because of course it was. I mean, they threw everything in the kitchen sink at each other. So of course the finish was a flash roll-up from out of nowhere. I mean, here's the thing. Objectively, what would you even want me to say about this? Do you want me to tell you that it sucked? Do you want me to tell you that they botched and neutered Mark Briscoe's entire AEW run? Do you want me to sit here and go through all the ways they've blown opportunities with making Mark one of their top babyface attractions? Why do I need to bother? It's been said by talking heads that are way above my expertise. I'm just a collective P in the overall pod, man. Just shooting straight facts at you. Yeah, of course it was garbage. I could call that the moment I saw the fucking popcorn bucket sitting on the concession tables. This is Tony Khan's booking in a nutshell right here, folks. This is unfiltered, unrestrained Mark Tony Khan booking. Doing nonsensical shit that tickles his fancies, regardless of whether or not it makes any sense to do. There was no coherent through line to any of this thought process. He just woke up one day and decided, let's have a concession stand brawl, because they did a couple in Memphis wrestling back in the early 80s that Jeff's daddy was involved with booking, so we should do one on Dynamite because it'll be fun. Not that the story called for it or that there was any rationale for doing so. Literally just because Tony gets off on this fetishistic ADD level of producing wrestling content. Stream of consciousness booking is all this is. He was watching some tapes of Memphis wrestling from 1980 and said, that looks cool. We should do that on Dynamite. Just at a poor level. Meanwhile, I'll just be over here fantasy booking all the ways they could have potentially made Mark Briscoe a megastar if Tony was actually concerned with drawing money and garnering new eyeballs. Just totally different worlds we live in. I don't know what to tell you. I really don't. He certainly wasn't interested in garnering new eyeballs with the next match, I can tell you that much. He did a good job running me off to use the bathroom during it. Another one of Tony's let's just throw together a bunch of random guys and see what the hell happens match. It's Chris Jericho, Sammy Guevara, and Minoru Suzuki versus Dante Martin, AR Fox, and Action Andretti. Yeah, you all remember that guy, right? The same Action Andretti that Jericho recommended Tony sign to a contract because he said he was going to make him into a star. And Jericho did such a wonderful job in establishing that, didn't he? Yeah. Look where Action Andretti is on the card now. He's certainly been relegated to lower card status, it would appear. Did you know there are actually still fucking morons out there that think Jericho made a star out of Andretti? There are news articles that have been published on this topic. People actually buy that Kool-Aid. And I'll give you a hint. They're all Wrestling Observer subscribers. Just mindless sheep wandering through a field of Meltzer Magoo obscurity. Anyway, yeah, this went about 10 minutes and I didn't watch a lick of it. It was time for the annual installment of let's dig up Suzuki's body from the New Japan graveyard and throw him out there to stumble, bumble, and fumble his way around the ring for a little bit. God. That guy's about as mobile as a double amputee in an iron lung. But after Jericho submitted one of the job guys with a lion tamer, they sent Renee Paquette out there to try and be relevant for more than 5 minutes. She interviewed Jericho and asked him about the Sting confrontation last week. And after Jericho stole the mic from her, no, Renee just sort of walked out and left. So she was relevant on camera for all of 5 seconds. Close enough. Anyway, long and boring Jericho monologue. Words, blah, blah. Who gives a fuck? Apparently they're going to be doing a 6-man at the pay-per-view with Jericho, Guevara, and Suzuki versus Darby, Sting, and a random New Japan guy that we'll get more info about on the Saturday show. Yippee. Can't wait. Is it Is it the Great Muta? Can he come out of retirement for one more match? I mean, he got Sting involved. He may as well just go there. I don't know. They can put off the announcement for as long as they want, because I'm not going to be watching that match at the pay-per-view, regardless of who the final partner is for the babyface team. They could dig up Giant Baba's corpse and put him in the ring at Forbidden Door. Still not enough to get me to want to sit through another fucking multi-man match. Not for the limited amount of tolerance I already have with this program to begin with. So moving on with things, going back to our earlier subject on Tony Khan's stream of consciousness booking in this company, apparently out of the blue, he just woke up one day and decided that we're going to have a blind tag team eliminator tournament. Why, when, where, who, what, how? No fucking clue. Just roll with it. It's good shit. No, actually, it's just another extension of Tony's fetishistic match ideas. Tournaments and battle royals. Can't ever go 2 weeks without seeing one of those fucking things pop up in some form or manner. They all suck. They always do. Anyway, Tony Schiavone and some other guy were in the back pulling names out of a drawing gimmick. And after Tony pulled out the first two names, he said the following words: "Wow," and "Whoa," and "What a tournament!" Forget it. I was going to go there, but just, no. The Tony Schiavone jokes write themselves at this point. Literally the definition of just being there to pick up a paycheck at this point. He's always on the show. He's always involved in something, and my God, he is so useless. Well, that whole segment carried over into what happened next. Here comes Adam Cole for a promo. Let me put a pause on that for a second here. I want to throw this out in the open. I myself do not claim to be a fashion expert. I'm not what you would call a stylist. But I do question the decision of Adam Cole choosing to wear a leather jacket during the dead of summer. Those buildings aren't air-conditioned either. I'm curious. Anyway. So he's out there talking about last week's match with MJF, saying he went through hell and back with Max, but didn't come out on top with the win. And on that same talking point, MJF didn't beat Cole either. So he's interested in having MJF come down so they can negotiate a rematch, since he also decided to duck out of the 5-minute challenge that Cole left on the table afterwards. So naturally, here comes MJF to respond. And of course, he's doing the whole condescending retort, telling Cole that he basically had him dead to rights last week. And had it not been for the time limit draw, MJF had that match in the bag. No question. That was actually a good bit of dialogue there. The classic Jerry Lawler type heat. I had you beat, even though everybody saw otherwise. And, well, the segment's kind of chugging along fine for a while. Finally, MJF declines Cole's request for a rematch because Max, quote, cares about Cole's safety and well-being. He says that with his ongoing history of concussions, Cole just can't afford to be risking another serious head injury by being involved in the ring with a top elite level athlete like MJF. Genius. And then the segment got kind of dumb. Tony Schiavone, God, that guy's just all over this fucking show. Well, he's now back out at the booth, so he randomly stands up and interjects while this back and forth is happening in the ring. Cole and MJF simultaneously tell Tony to shut the hell up. I think that was supposed to be comedy. It was kind of cringe, if I'm being honest. And he delivers the news that MJF and Adam Cole are now partners in this random eliminator tournament that Tony booked, again for reasons that have been entirely unexplained up to this point. There's no indication as to what's at stake, what the tournament is being designed to accomplish, what the reward is, anything. So already, I don't care. And now we're back to doing the tag partners that don't get along and hate each other story, which has been one of my biggest pet peeves in wrestling since the dawn of time. I mean, fucking Heyman used to do these in ECW all the time. Russo's notorious for these kinds of storylines. Whether it was WCW or TNA, the tag partners that obviously hated each other and they were just waiting to turn on the other and we all knew it. I mean, most of the time they weren't even clever swerves. I mean, I'm just trying to wrap my brain around this for a minute. First of all, Cole and MJF obviously have no incentive to team up. So by that logic, why would they care about this stupid fucking tournament to begin with? Why aren't they just refusing to partake in it? What's Tony going to do? Fine them? Suspend them? It'd be the first time in recorded history that Tony's on-screen character actually grew a set of balls and made authoritative calls. Secondly, and I know maybe this could all be part of some ploy on Cole's part so he could screw over MJF later on. Why did Cole basically do a complete 180 and decide to act all chummy with Max at the end? They had Tanahashi show up on the big screen to issue another challenge to MJF for the Forbidden Door pay-per-view. MJF's trying to weasel his way out of it until Cole calls him a coward. And then, I don't know, I guess because Max is now an idiot, he just rapidly accepts Tanahashi's challenge because Cole called him a fraidy cat. Really? So that's MJF's gimmick now? He just fires up on the first person that calls him a coward? Why would that get under his skin? Isn't MJF supposed to be a little brighter than the average heel on this show? Shouldn't he be wise enough to see through Cole's mind game trickery here? And then you got Cole patting MJF on the shoulder and wishing him, "Good luck, partner." What is this? Did I miss like 8 weeks of story or something? Where did any of this bullshit come from? Why are MJF and Cole partners now? Why are they in a tournament together with nothing on the line? What purpose does this serve anybody? Do they get a tag team title match out of it if they win? I don't know. None of it's been explained. And for my money, I don't want to see MJF and Adam Cole as the unlikely duo that plays good with each other. I don't want to see them team up. I want to see MJF face the best suitable competition in singles action for his title, and I want to actually see them book Max like a fucking world champion. Not getting involved in whatever the hell this is. Just overcomplicating matters unnecessarily. That's all Tony ever does when he books this show. He's so rattled. What are they doing with this fucking guy? They're wasting MJF's entire title run on low-level BS. And I'm sorry if that pisses off Adam Cole fans, but I'm just calling it like I see it. I hated that match last week. I don't really have any desire to see them rematch at any point. I certainly have zero desire to see them as the partners that don't like each other but have to team up anyway because the boss said so. Is anybody interested in this? And for all the people that sit there and say Tony always books long term, if you're telling me this was part of Tony's vision when he made Max the world champion, that this is what he had in line for him like 6 months after winning the belt, I'll be the first to say, maybe you should have gone in a different direction. Because this shit ain't working for me right now, brother. The best possible scenario for MJF right now is to get himself back in touch with Punk and try to respark that lightning feud they had about a year ago. Because it ain't working with Adam Cole. I can tell you that much. On the topic of Punk, in tournaments for that matter, I forgot about the Owen Hart tournament. Good God. So what, now we got 2 layering tournaments going on at the same time? My God. Someone needs to advise this man to seek counseling. He needs professional help like a drunk guy needs an Alka-Seltzer. In any case, we got some bracket updates, finally, for the Owen Hart Foundation tournament. I only jotted down the brackets for the men's tournament because, who gives a fuck about the women's tournament? So we have Juice Robinson versus Ricky Starks, Dustin Rhodes versus Powerhouse Hobbs, Roderick Strong versus Samoa Joe, and CM Punk versus Satoshi Kojima. And before you all start yelling at me and coming at me for the "who the fuck is Satoshi Kojima" comments, don't fret. I actually know who the guy is. Christ, I'm not that out of touch with Japan's wrestling market. I've seen plenty of Kojima matches over the years. I just watched a match with him and Dr. Death Steve Williams in All Japan from like the early 2000s, not all that long ago. I think he was technically their first ever IWGP heavyweight champion, which I know is the main belt for New Japan now. Currently held by Sonata, which is kind of tragic, to be honest. And the guy's not young. What is he now, like early 50s? Man, I remember seeing clips of that guy from like the late 90s. It's risking it for the biscuit if you ask me. Not really sure what a match with him and Punk is going to look like on paper. I'd like to keep myself optimistic, but that one's a little rough around the edges. I don't know how that match is going to go. I have all the confidence in the world with Punk, but they might be stretching it a little bit here. Still, though, that's a hell of a set of brackets for opening rounds. It's miles better than what they had for last year's tournament, where they stupidly had Cole go over Joe in the finals. That about killed Joe's momentum flatter than 4 o'clock. But this does set up some potentially big matches if they end up doing things like Joe versus Punk. That could be a show stealer. I didn't take the time to actually look with how they set up the graphics. Let me look this up real quick. I'm gonna put a pause in the show here so I can see if I can find a full bracket. Let's see. I'll use WrestleZone. Why not? All right, here we go. Yeah, I needed to see the visual of it because when they just announced the names, it wasn't really clear on how they were structuring the actual tournament. All right, so it looks like we have Punk versus Kojima, which is going to be happening at Forbidden Door. And then underneath of that, we have Roderick Strong and Samoa Joe. So those guys are actually going to face off with each other in the semifinals, it looks like. And then on the other side of the brackets, they've got Hobbs and Dustin. And then they got Juice and Ricky on that side as well. So those guys will end up squaring off in the semifinal round. So it actually looks like it won't boil down to Punk and Joe in the finals, which is kind of an interesting decision. There's actually a couple scenarios that could play out there. I mean, I have to imagine Punk's going to win the tournament, right? It's kind of early to be having him lose singles matches. That's interesting. I don't really know. They got me stumped on that one. I mean, it's a toss-up between him and Ricky. There's no one else that could win this tournament. It's got to be either Punk or Ricky. It's possible they could have Joe go over Punk, because those guys have been teasing a setup for a feud. I know Punk has been interested in working with Joe, so maybe they decide to do like a series of matches, and this could be like round one where you put Joe over Punk and then build up to a couple matches later on where Punk gets his win back. And there's a laundry list of ways they could go, but I like it. I'm intrigued. I don't know where and when the tournament finals will take place, but yeah, that entire layout has Punk's fingerprints all over it. Saying, I want the pro wrestlers on this fucking thing. No company mascot involved. So I'm definitely I'm looking forward to seeing how things pan out there. Speaking of the company mascot, boy, wouldn't you know it, that guy wrestled this week. Yeah, sigh of relief. I was getting worried for a minute there. Thought Tony was actually going to go a full week without booking an appearance for the company maggot. Not that it mattered anyway. I mean, you all know my approach when it comes to Orange Cassidy matches. They can't get me to reach for that remote soon enough. And of course, it's another one of these Japanese jerk-off session matches with random Forbidden Door opponents. This one was him and Katsuyori Shibata wrestling Daniel Garcia and Zack Sabre Jr. Like, seriously, why? Why would anybody care? What was the announcement I read after this? That they're doing some kind of four-way at the pay-per-view for Orange Cassidy's fake toy belt? What? God, talk about spontaneous booking. Of course, it's another multi-man match, so you already know my take on it. Nah, I'm good. I'll preserve my sanity a little longer with not having to subject myself to any of that nonsense. And I'm still weighing my options with whether or not I even want to watch that Omega Ospreay match. It's like a 50-50 shot. We'll see how the rest of the card pans out. I also contemplated whether or not I was going to watch this TBS title match with Statlander and Taya Valkyrie. I went back and forth with it, but, it's kind of late. I was getting kind of annoyed and tired. I know Statlander's dropped the alien gimmick and she's starting to take her work a little more seriously now. Good for her. Doesn't mean it's going to get me to want to sit through most of the girls' content we get on this show from week to week. So I took a hard pass on this one too. And that basically left me with about 10 minutes left in the show to check out whatever was going to happen in this main event segment. While I know I'm usually walking right into the domain of chaos when it comes to anything on the show involving the BCC, I was a little curious with how they were going to go about booking the Kazuchika Okada Bryan Danielson face-off. Because when they put the graphic up on screen, I thought, oh, okay, maybe it'll be a promo. Boy, did I learn my lesson the hard way. Now, before we got to all that, we had some other dirty laundry to air out here. And I'm not just talking about Eddie Kingston's pit stains. I was going to go there, but Maybe I'll just save that talking point for another time. You know, for as much shit as I give Adam Cole for the way he looks on TV, Eddie Kingston, man. I mean, I understand it's part of the gimmick, but my God. You know, watching him out there with that beer gut hanging out, like, dude, it's unprofessional. And again, like, I understand Eddie Kingston's thing is that he doesn't have a physique because he's the street fighter, so it kind of fits the persona, but it's visually off-putting. It's all I can say about it. You know, he's out there doing the promo face-off with Moxley, and I'm distracted because all I can look at is Eddie Kingston's body. You know, he's got that oversized t-shirt on there. It's like, I mean, the last time we saw the guy do stuff in the ring, he wasn't athletically impressive. His cardio was all over the place. I don't know, man. I mean, the guy can still cut a promo. I'll never take that away from him. You know, he's out there mocking the idea that he would ever have much in common with the Elite. But he also has his share of issues with a lot of members of the BCC. With the exception of the oil mechanic. They, how you say, they go back a ways. By the way, he said he doesn't like Claudio. Why? What's his beef with Claudio? Like, he outright name dropped him. He said, I don't like that guy. Okay. Cool. Explain. How come? What did he do? Did he burn your house down? Did he hijack your car? Details. Don't leave us in the dark. Explain this shit. Motherfuckers. Now, Claudio was more irrelevant to the conversation because here comes Moxley, and he and Kingston have a rather awkward exchange until Kingston just randomly goes, oh, by the way, the fifth man is Tomohiro Ishii. Because obviously, makes all the sense in the world, you see. Yes, Ishii. That guy. The one we haven't seen on AEW in 9 months. He just comes out here, entrance music and all. And Ishii made such a dominant, triumphant return on behalf of the Elites team that he proceeded to come down the aisleway, slide into the ring, and then immediately get blindsided by the heels. Laid out like a schmuck. Didn't get one lick of offense in. And pretty soon, after Bryan Danielson had threatened to kick his head in, here comes Okada in a white t-shirt and street pants. Just looked like a fucking bum off the streets. And Ishii totally vanishes and is never seen for the remainder of the program. Where did he go? No idea. Apparently he just disappeared into the same void that everybody else did after they powdered in that opening segment. It's one of the unsolved mysteries of modern wrestling where people just vanish into space and we never see or hear from them again. I have to imagine the people in the arena know what happens to them. But for the people watching on TV, we're all left in the dark. They just probably walk up the aisleway and go to the back and don't even bother selling anything. And, well, I'll just save my breath with the Okada run-in. Yeah, it was not a promo exchange. He just came down to confront Danielson. He was then immediately jumped by Flat Wheel Yuta. And the heels tried to gang up on Okada until he fought them both off and sent Danielson running with the tease of the Rainmaker. And my final note reads, boy, am I glad the Saturday show looks more promising. And this segment didn't even have a physical appearance from Omega or the Bucks. And it was still abhorrently bad. I'm actually wondering if Punk ran them off because of him being on the show. It's the only thing I can think of. I mean, whatever. The segment sucked, but it was only like 8 minutes. I mean, Okada versus Danielson is an intriguing match on paper, despite the complete haphazard way they've gone about booking it on TV. I guess if you remove all that from the equation, sure, the match will have my attention. I know Danielson can wrestle. I mean, I've had not so great things to say about Okada in the past, but he's had some good matches. It'll probably be fantastic. It's the argument for the kind of people that like that thing, that's the kind of thing those people like. But I don't know. What else is there? Tanahashi and MJF? Maybe. I can take or leave Ospreay and Okada, or Ospreay and Omega. You know, everything else on the card looks like it's some kind of multi-man cluster that I don't have any vested interest in watching. I mean, for my money, it should be a pretty easy watch. If I can find a way to illegally download a stream or something, you know, I can watch what I need to, skip out on the junk material, and be satisfied with that. You know, as far as the Dynamite show goes, if you can even call this a go-home show for Forbidden Door, the last hour was completely skippable. You know, I'd argue everything after the Punk stuff in the opener was skippable. But here's what I'm still trying to figure out. Okay, so they got Dynamite. They've got Collision. What's going on with the roster split? Is that going to be a thing? Are guys just going to randomly jump ship like they do on Raw and SmackDown? I mean, quite frankly, it might not be a bad thing for the Wednesday shows if Punk makes a casual appearance every couple of weeks. I'm thinking this one was an anomaly, considering the Elite took a powder and decided not to show up. Probably because they got scared that Punk was going to be on the show, so they tucked their tails between their legs. Bunch of pussies they are. But it's funny how that works. A segment involving Punk, FTR, Jay White, and Juicy Fruit, all guys that were part of that 6-man on the Collision show. Now we turn around a few days later, shooting an angle on Dynamite. They're outsiders in this case. They still end up being the best part of the show. Now you throw Ricky into the equation, that'll certainly be a net positive. But like I mentioned before, when it comes to the split of Dynamite versus the Collision programming, I'm still kind of waiting to see how it all unfolds. But for the meantime, I'm going to keep sticking the course with watching both. You know, once I get a better idea of how the Collision show is going to form in about a month or so, that's when I can start contemplating whether or not I want to drop Dynamite from the weekly report. But there you have it. It was the usual train wreck Wednesday program that we've all come to know and love. Anyway, so let's start digging into the retro content for the week. And we're back to the regular Saturday programming. After a slew of shorter Crockett TV episodes, we have returned to the regular 2-hour format. And last week's show was all centered around the Dusty Tully match in Greensboro, where they turned Dusty over the proverbial knee and gave him a brutal spanking. He was screwed 6 ways from Sunday. Screwed out of the TV title, screwed out of the money, everything. Didn't have a penny to his name after that match was over. And that was more or less half the program right there. We dealt a little bit with the fallout from that, but we've also got bigger fish to fry as we edge closer to the 1987 Great American Bash. And you know who's really excited about that? Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin. He's super duper pumped about the 87 Bash Tour. So pumped, in fact, that he refused to wait for his cue to come out to do the promo. And, well, I can pretty much sum up the promo in the following words. Jimmy Garvin is so excited about the bash. And if you're wondering to yourself, okay, was there anything else to the promo beyond that? The answer is no. Just Jimmy Garvin screamed really loud and talked about how he was stoked for the 87 Bash Tour. That was all he said. But boy, was he passionate about saying it. He still pissed at Flair, too. There's that. And from there, we cut to the ring for a Barry Windham-Brody Chase squash. Now, last week, if you recall, we saw the TV debut of his brother, Kendall, all 6'5", 115 pounds of him. Nothing but skin and bones. This week, we were back to showcasing Barry again. Kind of been lost in the shuffle lately after being removed from the title equation with Flair. You know, plus the team with him and Ronnie Garvin kind of took a backseat for a little bit. So he's sort of been spinning his wheels for a while. I mean, he's on the show, but not really involved with a whole lot right now. But the people are still hot for him. I mean, do you think that guy was one of the most heavily pushed baby faces on the roster with the way that people respond to him? He went over with the lariat here in a few minutes. They were definitely stretching out the squashes a little longer this week, now that they were back to the 2-hour format. In some cases, that was not entirely a good thing. Here, it was just kind of dull and uninteresting. As was Barry's follow-up promo, with sweat pouring from his face. Totally winded and blown up here. Basically talked about how there's going to be a lot of pain, blues, and agony for his opponents at the end of the Bash Tour. Up to this point, those names included Tully Blanchard and Big Bubba Rogers. Also, Bubba is still the World Heavyweight Champion of a nameless promotion that Barry is yet to explain. For the record, it's the UWF title. But at no point has Barry actually said the words UWF. It's just the World Heavyweight Belt. Is that like a thing in Crockett Promotions where they just weren't allowed to talk about the UWF in name? But, yeah, that was about it. Very bland promo. Couldn't hear half of it because the fans were drowning him out in the studio. That also didn't help. And coming back from break, talking about this show going back to the regular 2-hour window, that also meant we were going to get plenty of void filler. A lot of placeholder stuff in the card this week, which perfectly exemplifies everything about Jimmy Valiant and Lasertron versus the Thunderfoots. Now, one might wonder, if the Hobbits were calling it, wouldn't it be Thunder Feet? It's a good question. We should ask the Proudfoots. Anyway, this is a complete comedy match. Unfortunately, it was not a short comedy match, so my patience ran thin rather quickly. Valiant and Hector beat up the Goons. There was a very momentary heat session on Hector until Jimmy tagged back in and did every cheap, underhanded tactic in the book, including ripping at one of the Thunderfoot's masks. And after about 3 or 4 minutes of torturous television, Lasertron grounded one of the Thunderfoots so Jimmy could tag in, hit the elbow drop, and pin him. My final note reads, never in my entire life have I loved a particular talent for all that he ever brought to the table, yet at the same time have zero desire to see him ever wrestle another match on the show again. Jimmy Valiant, man. For all the wacky promos and the moments he's given us over the years, at this point, it's like, we've seen it all. It's old. It's tiresome. It's not even comically entertaining at this point. He just needs to go away. I mean, 87 was more or less the final curtain call for him as an overall career. So, couldn't have come at a better time. But yeah, I'm kind of burnt out on the whole Jimmy Valiant thing. For every great moment we got with him in Memphis, there's also this bullshit he was doing in Crockett Promotions in '87. I don't even know what you call it. Holding on to his career. God, was it awful. But let's turn this around for a little bit and talk about some good stuff. The Dusty Magnum sit-down, with both guys reflecting on the Greensboro match and all the trials and tribulations Dusty went through in the last few weeks. Talks about how things got out of control. In the heat of the battle, Tommy Young made the call he made, and Dusty has to live with that decision. But he can't live with JJ and Tully walking off with $100,000 like two scalded dogs. And Dusty's going to have his chance of redemption. July 18th, Great American Bash Tour in Charlotte. One-on-one with Tully inside a ring wrapped in barbed wire. That is where Dusty gets his retribution. Meanwhile, for Magnum, he feels personally responsible for what happened in Greensboro, letting Tully and JJ walk off with $100,000 and him not being able to do anything to stop it. As far as he's concerned, he's sitting next to the TV champion right now. And one way or the other, there's going to be a day where justice is served. And, well, I can confidently say, Magnum never misses a beat. The promos are still out of this world tremendous. It's unfortunate we never get to see him wrestle again because, man, they were really giving us signs of hope and promise here. Talking about the day he gets back in the ring and beats some respect into Tully. Just sitting there with modern eyes like, fuck. What could have been and what never happened. I mean, it left you wanting so much more. You know, Dusty and Magnum doing this electric babyface promo, making you think, damn, the day's going to come when Tully and JJ get theirs. If only it was meant to be. Well, Tully got his. He got his in a sense of 1988, right before he got blacklisted from Crockett. But technically, we're not supposed to know about that. Anyway, we came back from break for a Nikita Koloff squash. He wrestled, I don't know, generic fat job guy number 73. I believe the name was Hal Moore. Whatever, just more stockpile of TV jobbers. Long gone are the days where we could sit here and poke fun at the Tony Zanes and the Lee Peaks of the world. This guy was so plump and out of shape he couldn't even hit the ropes. I mean, Nikita won with a sick one like a minute and a half. There's literally nothing to say about it. And then we came back for the real highlight of the program. Great American Bash music plugs. Oh, yeah. Been looking forward to talking about this one. What class acts are they going to bring in for the musical performances at this year's Bash Tour? After last year's stellar round of concerts. Well, actually, I don't recall us getting any names. Instead of how, with what they did last year, where they just rattled off like 100 musicians, this one was kind of generic and broad. They just said, live music, folks. Buy your ticket now. Which might have been a clever strategic programming tactic on their part, now that I think of it. They didn't want to run off fans immediately. But that was mostly a lead-in so Jim Crockett could run down the stipulations for the Dusty Tully match on July 18th at the Omni, the barbed wire match for the TV title, and the $50,000. Well, $100,000 in total, but the $50,000 that JJ stole. And for more pop references that totally went over my head, because I was not a sports fanatic, Coach Barry Switzer from the offices of Oklahoma University, here to give us a Bash Tour plug and talk about the forthcoming big events. And of course, my hindbrain asks, who the fuck is Barry Switzer? did not care enough to do a Google search, but for anybody at the time that was a big sports fan in the 80s, and I'm sure you got the reference, didn't get over with me, but, them's the breaks. Speaking of things that didn't get over with me, this show, and it did not get any more promising with the next match. It's the Mod Squad wrestling Mike Jackson and Alan Martin. I haven't seen the Jeffers brothers on this show in a long time. Spiker and Basher, I believe their names were at this point. And, well, actually, allow for me to just reiterate what I wrote down in my notes. Quote, when one of the job guys is a better overall worker than the guy or guys they're trying to get over in the actual match, big problem. No offense to the Jeffers twins, but, yeah, they kind of got outclassed by Mike Jackson here. Boring squash, went forever. Jeffers finally won with a body slam flying elbow combo. There wasn't even anything remotely amusing that I could talk about or bury with the job guys. It was just long and painfully dull. They were basically told, all right, you got 5 minutes to kill. Take as long as you need. Yeah, if it already hasn't been established, the show is kind of dick. It's probably the one drawback about the syndicated Saturday shows going the full 2 hours. A lot of void filler and underneath stuff that doesn't really grab your attention. Take, for example, Ivan Koloff and the Raging Bull versus Todd Champion and Denny Brown. Yeah, y'all remember the time that Ivan had to step in as Manny's replacement partner because Rick Rude walked out of Crockett Promotions with one half of the tag belts? Good times, I know. But at least we can confirm they did actually work some matches together before that team was also dropped and forgotten about. Pietrov was nowhere to be seen or spoken of. This was also shortly before Manny left the company too, hence the abrupt dropping of the Ivan Raging Bull team. This was also painfully boring and long. More of that happened when Ivan was in the ring. Bull at least was throwing some haymakers at one point to keep the energy level up. I did like the moment here. It was right toward the finish. Todd's getting beaten down by the heels, and he manages to cut off Ivan near the ropes. And I think the idea was that he was supposed to go for an Irish whip, but Ivan would hold on to the ropes, so then Todd would take a bump and sell. Basically what happened was, Todd didn't get a chance to grab Ivan's wrist for the Irish whip part, so he sort of just took a phantom bump for no reason while Ivan looked at him with the biggest what the fuck expression on his face. But, hey, gave us some redeeming comedy. That's what we come for on these Crockett TV reviews. To see the job guys fuck up left and right and look like idiots. And the boys beat the crap out of them. But Denny ended up making a short comeback. Ivan cut him off so him and Bull could hit him with a double back body drop. And then finally, the heels gave Brown a double-assisted sickle for the pin. Last couple minutes were okay. Beyond that, nothing to write home about. Although we can still keep in our back pocket for the time being, Manny Fernandez, he's still a thing. He's not around for long, but he is still on the program. Finally, though, got something worth talking about here. A halfway decent promo segment from Tully and JJ, with Dark Journey standing there, being hollow. Anyway, Tully's covering everything regarding the Greensboro match. The fact that Dusty claims to be the world's television champion when the proof is always in the pudding. And who's the one currently standing with the TV belt in hand? It's Tully. I believe he called Magnum TA, quote, Maggie May, which was oddly humorous for some reason. And he actually fired up here and did a great heat promo. Says if Magnum wants to make empty threats at Tully's expense, he can stand right up out of his chair so Tully can smack him back down for good. And as far as Jim Crockett jerking him around with half their money, instead of canceling the check outright, now he's got Tully booked in a barbed wire match with Dusty in Atlanta. JJ's great here, ranting and raving about having to walk out of the bank without a deposit slip because Jim Crockett called to have the check canceled. That was quite the humiliating experience for poor JJ Dillon. Just classic Tully Blanchard Enterprises. On top of stealing the Horseman's money, Jim Crockett's also out there to have Tully sliced up like he got run through a razor blade factory. But at least we can confirm, when JJ and Tully beat Dusty again, they want their payment in cash. They figured out the master plan. Cash withdrawal. If only they were smart enough to be ahead of the curve for the Greensboro match. Back from break, and Nikita Koloff out there to talk about Wargames for a minute. He basically says that he wants to get hurt in Wargames because pain causes him joy. Sounds like John Moxley logic. He also called out Luger for being a party boy instead of focusing on trying to beat Nikita for the U.S. title. And then he snarled and roared at the camera. I was half expecting smoke to come out of his nose. Very intense. And angry. Speaking of intense and angry, that was the perfect transition to talk about this Ronnie Garvin match, where apparently somebody did not clue in the job guide that wearing similar looking ring gear to your opponent, bad idea. Especially when said opponent is Ronnie fucking Garvin. Now, I can't tell if he was directly hazing the poor guy or if Ronnie was just pissed off about something. Maybe somebody slashed his tires in the parking lot. I don't really know. We always commonly talk about how Ronnie Garvin would go out there and beat up the job guys. That was just kind of his thing. I've seen him beat up job guys. This was like a whole different level, though. He beat the fuck out of this dude. Chops, stretching, back rakes, slaps to the face. At one point, he was going right out of the playbook of Jimmy Valiant and going right for the face gouging and eye raking. I'm like, did this guy turn heel off camera and I just was never notified to it? I mean, David Crockett, as usual, way too overly excited about this onslaught. Then coming back from break, we had the insertion of headbutts from Garvin, where I can't tell if it was spit or mouth foam. Either way, it was disgusting. At this point, I was convinced that somebody may have ball-tapped Ronnie earlier in the day and he was just taking out his frustrations on this guy, because he was ruthless in this match. And finally, he won with the knockout punch. And I believe they were in the process of scooping the guy off the mat with a spatula as we spoke. Meanwhile, we go to the interview desk, and Ronnie got on the microphone to inform us that he's really mad. He's tired of wrestling a bunch of pussies. He wants to fight. He wants to deliver his hands of stone to anybody that signs on the dotted line. Somebody's going to lose money. Somebody's going to lose their teeth. And somebody's going to get their ass kicked. At which point I concluded by writing down, so avoid Ron Garvin at all costs. Noted. Got it. The heel that decides to sign an open contract for a match against Ronnie Garvin for the Great American Bash, good luck. That's all I can say. And then, flipping that entire segment on its face. Here comes the other Garvin brother to wrestle. Now it's Jimmy Garvin versus Terry Jones. And of course, Jimmy's out there smiling and dancing and shaking his hips. Just peachy to be there. Never you mind his kayfabe brother, who literally just killed a man in broad daylight like 8 seconds prior. But we all know Jimmy doesn't get paid by the hour. So it's bell rings, couple takedowns, couple body slams, brainbuster, 1, 2, 3. Simple as that. And he was really milking that brainbuster too. The fans were calling for that shit. It's like when people used to mark out for Lex Luger using the rack on Nitro. It's all they ever cared about. And when Jimmy hit the brainbuster, everyone went, yeah! Speaking of Luger, he was out there for a promo with JJ. My notes are a little scattered right now because, well, side note, I actually had to watch the show through multiple sittings, so my editing is kind of all over the map here. I'm pretty sure the JJ Luger promo followed. Well, anyhow, not much of note was said. JJ's doing a compare and contrast between last year's Great American Bash and this year's. Says that the two things that distinguish the 86 and 87 Bash tours are the Wargames match and the arrival of the total package. Then Luger did another one of his I'm pissed now promos. He rattled off like 800 things within the span of about 2 minutes. Must have been taking some pointers from Big Dust for this promo. He talked about how he chose to sign with the NWA because this is where the best competition in the world is. Talked about the Wargames match and how it's a built-in advantage for the Horsemen because submitting and surrendering is not in their vocabulary. To which I noted, it's true. Just ask Tully Blanchard after that Starrcade 85 match with Magnum. He never quit. And he'll tell you that straight to your face to this day. And in another one of those classic popcorn fart moments for Crockett TV, Luger does another one of his seething promos on Nikita Koloff. He says he's sick and tired of hearing people ask when he's going to become the new U.S. Heavyweight Champion, at which point he proceeds to then rip off his tank top to reveal his total package body, for lack of better terms. Naturally, there are some girls in the crowd that react to this with tears of joy. So does the camera choose to pan over to film those girls? No. Instead, they put the floor cam on 3 older women in the back corner of the studio that looked bored and uninterested. Only one of 2 possible scenarios. They were either married or they're lesbians. But the point is, Lex Luger smash. That is all. I gotta get that Luger sound drop. Let's see if I can add it to the show later on. Then we came back for a Ricky Morton promo. And my notes read as follows. Loud noises. Specifically, the fans chanting rock and roll and totally drowning out Ricky's promo. I'll be honest with you. I tried. I strained. I did everything in my power to capture one lick of dialogue. I couldn't. Something about Jimmy Cornette in the Midnight Express. Something about them planning on shoving the U.S. tag titles down their throats. Which doesn't seem pleasant if Ricky and Robert were planning on wearing those belts around their waists at any point. Not that we needed to worry about that. But that was more or less a Ricky said some words promo. And you couldn't hear a lick of it. Then we cut back to the ring for Kendall Windham versus Tim Hardy. Kendall's second week working the Saturday Night Superstation on Crockett Promotions. And we already covered a little bit of detail about his backstory last time. Just another quick showcase squash for him. They wrestled for a minute or two. The people were passionately chanting for the Bulldog. Meanwhile, Kendall spent the bulk of the match working over Tim's arm until he finally just hit the Bulldog out of nowhere for the pin. All it took was for one lady in the crowd to shout, "Come on, Wendell, we want the Bulldog!" I believe that was coded language for, "Kendall, take it home. We're dying on the vine out here." Good to know the studio fans were calling the shots back in the day for the boys. They should call some of them up to agent these matches I see on Dynamite from week to week. They might come in handy. Anyway, we came back for a Road Warriors promo. And much like the Ricky Morton promo we glossed over a minute ago, allow for me to give you another Cliff's Notes rundown of this promo. More loud noises. And a "let the games begin" comment. I believe that was from Hawk. It's like the only thing he said in the entire promo. And the Animal talked for a while and couldn't hear jack shit because the studio crowd completely drowned him out. But I can confirm for sure, 100%, the Legion of Doom, they are stoked about Wargames. Including Dusty and Nikita, because they also joined in the fun here. The room was more nuclear than the pop Sami Zayn got back in Montreal at the beginning of the year. It's a bigger pop than any time somebody in the Bloodline turned on Roman. Literally, it's like the greatest thing about this entire promo. The Road Warriors are out there talking for a minute, and even when Nikita and Dusty come out, all they have to do is stand there. Didn't need to speak one word. They just stood alongside the Legion of Doom and let the fans go apeshit for it. And the last thing I noted about the segment was, back when babyfaces were actually white hot. You don't see too many occasions like that anymore. I mean, God, even CM Punk didn't get a pop like this for his return for the Collision debut. It's crazy to think guys used to be this over. Literally just by going out there and standing alongside their friends. I mean, Dusty, that was kind of to be expected. But, man, I remember, sitting there and watching tapes back in the day. They were going all in with the hype for this Wargames match on television. They were really trying to hype this up as the biggest match in the history of the sport. Whether or not you believe that, they're selling it to you like it is. It's good shit. And then they completely took the air out of the room with Lex Luger versus Dexter Westcott. Beyond Tony and David telegraphing the rack about 9 hours before Luger actually finished the guy off, the crowd was also unanimously trying to find ways to entertain themselves here. I believe we had chants of JJ the Thief at one point. Obviously in reference to JJ stealing Dusty's money and bolting out of the Greensboro Coliseum like a coward. There was also another chant that came through here a few times. I couldn't pick up on it for the life of me. At one point, I thought they were chanting bear hug. I don't think it was that. I mean, Luger did put the guy in a bear hug for what felt like an eternity. That was the point where the announcers were fishing around for things to talk about. As usual, David Crockett delivered the patented "look at him" line. You ever notice David does that? Like, there will be long stretches where he just doesn't say anything, and then out of the blue, he'll just go, "Look at him." Or, "There he is." Like, yes, David, I see. It is indeed the total package. Live and in living color. You can't miss him if you tried. Fucking blind dude could see the guy. He's too much. He really is. But yeah, Luger kind of toyed with the guy for hours and then won with the rack. It's just nothing to say about it. Then we came back for a Horseman promo. I believe this was promo number 4 or 5 for the Horsemen on this one show. And they're still doing the 4 Horsemen graphic plug before they actually cut to the booth at the trumpet fanfare and the pomp and circumcision thing. And this time it's Ric Flair doing the solo promo. Just kind of out there to remind us all that he's still the man. Becky Lynch might want to take notes. He's, doing the monologue about how the Horsemen are the best thing going today. He plugged the Wargames match and the match beyond. I keep forgetting that they use that term interchangeably. But, he's going over how there's a lot of money and prestige on the line, and that's right up Flair's wheelhouse. He may as well have just said, I'm going to go out there so I can bleed like a stuffed pig, because that'll give me a bunch of attention. And, beyond that, the only other thing I noted here was the random heat promo he decided to cut on Larry Bird, claiming that he's going to make more money on July 4th in the Omni than Bird will make in the entire month of July. I have no idea. Just more of Flair being Flair. He also picked a random woman out of the crowd to come over so she could put Flair over. And, I'll give her credit. She complied. She didn't try to rib him. Must have been a plant. Looking back, I honestly could have just summed up that entire thing as Flair being Flair. But you all know me. I like to try and bring meticulous note-taking to these reviews. For example, the next match that took place on the show, a thorough breakdown of this instant 5-star classic in the making. The match, the Italian Stallion versus Tommy Angel. I fell asleep. No, actually, that's a lie. I didn't actually fall asleep. I just kind of blanked out while the match was in progress and forgot to go back and watch it. Stallion won. I think. They both had white tights on. It was hard to tell. When I mentally checked back in, it was for the Midnight Squash against Larry Stevens and Mike Force. Beautiful Bobby was extra saucy on this program. I mean, we've seen him rib guys on these studio squashes a time or two, but this was like no fucks given Bobby on steroids. He was just out there to have a good time this week. Giving the jobbers clean breaks, kindly dumping them out through the concrete, kindly grabbing them by the scruff of the neck so he could drag them over to the interview podium and pop them in the jaw. He must have gotten a love letter from a fan or something. He was in a relatively good mood. Anyway, I'm spending more time talking about this than necessary. Midnight Domination. Corny was loud and talkative as per usual. Tony was worthless. David was David. And the Midnights hit a middle rope spine buster that they coined the Grave Digger. Did that move ever stick? I don't remember that being part of the Midnights' arsenal. I mean, I remember a lot of the classic Midnights moves. The Grave Digger was not one of them. I mean, even Corny's promo afterwards was a total throwaway. Blah, blah, Midnights are the greatest team of all time. Blah, blah, Rock and Roll Express can't beat them. Blah, blah, Great American Bash Tour. Blah, blah, scaffold match. Oh, wait, I'm spoiling Starrcade. Oops! I jumped the gun. You can all admonish me in the comments section. If you already can't tell, I've been over this show for the better part of the last 15 minutes. I'm just trying to push through to the end here. We don't have much more to go. We had Arn and Tully versus Daryl Dalton and Rick Sullivan. The last time I saw Daryl Dalton wrestle on this show, I noted that he looked like a giant baked potato with arms and legs. Since that point, he's appeared to have gained about 50 pounds. He looked even more visually ridiculous. He looked like one of those Pillsbury dough biscuits you pop out of the cans. Just layers upon layers of body fat jiggling on this fucking guy. Nearly lost my appetite. I mean, thankfully, he was only in there for about a minute. Aside from that, Arn totally killed them. Arn hit a double A spine buster on Sullivan and then tagged in Tully so he could hit the slingshot for the 3. Crowd cheer for the slingshot. Just pointing that out for the record. And now that kind of brought us full circle to close things out with our 97th Horseman promo on this one program. And again, they're just taking turns, putting each other over, and talking about why they're the best in the business. I mean, Arn did pretty much all the talking here, while everyone else just kind of stood around and looked cool. Arn's message was, if you get in the ring with the Horsemen, you better bring 110%, because the Horsemen don't go into a fight at anything less. And of course, we get the classic send-off with the Horsemen sticking their hands in for the team huddle. That's always fun. It was a moderately okay finish to what otherwise would have been one of the most lifeless, boring episodes of Crockett TV we've ever covered. I don't know what happened. They were on a good track record for the last couple months, and this one hit a brick wall. I don't even really know how to describe it. Like, most of the squashes were just throwaways to begin with, but this is like one of those shows where they idealistically could have probably done it in about 45 minutes and it would accomplish the same goal. I have no idea why they went on a string of shorter Saturday episodes to begin with, but I mean, this one almost could have gone that same length. Almost nothing of note happened, outside some Bash Tour plugs and some of the Wargame hype. Long stretches, though, this week where I was just sitting at my computer thinking, what the fuck am I supposed to say about half this shit? I mean, the promos were okay, but geez. And they weren't giving me much to work with this week. It's probably why it took me more than one day to watch the show. I mean, I also had a lot going on, so I wasn't able to sit down for more than 2 or 3 hours at a time. But, guess we'll try again next week. Maybe they'll turn it around. We'll see. I mean, the 87 Bash period is really good for Crockett. It doesn't start going down the drain until later on in the year. So, we still have a few peak months left before things just kind of tailspin in a lot of ways. In the meantime, we talk about Dallas TV. It was definitely a show that existed. Now, we did get a great main event this week. They brought back one of my favorite Dallas classics here. A match so famous that even Vince Russo couldn't help but rip it off decades later. The only difference is World Class actually did it correctly. Before we get there, though, I have to sort of truck through some of the other content this week. Unfortunately, kicking things off with this opening bout, The Missing Link versus Pat Rose. Yeah, that match kind of stunk up the Sportatorium for a few minutes. One of the only things I noted about this was Bill Mercer's continual attempts at basically trying to come up with a bunch of politically correct ways to talk about the Missing Link's odd personality. He may as well have just said, the guy has an extra chromosome. The kayfabe personality, not the actual guy working the gimmick. Anyway, this all but sucked. Link did about 50-something headbutts, some of which connected with Rose, others that made contact with various parts of the ring. I also believe I heard Mercer reference that Missing Link represented something similar to a prehistoric salamander. While the match was in progress, I took the time to look up some images of salamanders just to confirm whether or not Mercer was on crack when he said this. He was entirely off base. Anyway, after delivering those 50-something headbutts, he finally put Rose away with, shocker here, a flying headbutt. And then Mercer immediately pitched a commercial with a world-class rolls-on comment. That was all I had to say about it. And then we come back for our first commercial with a pre-tape. I believe they said at the NWA conference room. So, possibly their headquarters department. And this was a meeting to discuss the validity of the World Six-Man Tag Belt switch at the Texas Stadium event. The Freebirds are here to argue that the call and the title switch should be overturned because they were unjustly beaten. Yeah, they now apparently have brought this to the NWA's attention. Approximately 4 or 5 weeks after the actual stadium event. And of course, Mercer is there to point out that the Freebirds, who called this meeting, are approximately 30 minutes late. Classic. So they arrive and waltz into the conference room, making a big scene. The Von Erichs are impatiently sitting there with their hands folded. Hayes is making a total jag off of himself. It's just awesome. Anyway, it is a closed circuit meeting, so the camera crew was not permitted to be in the room while the negotiations were happening. This was not the Dusty Tully meeting at Jim Crockett's office from the Superstation where the camera crew was just filming everything from start to finish, including the 40-something camera cuts. So, so Mercer's out there trying to bring us up to date about what's being argued. The idea is that when the Freebirds were pinned in that match, the wrong Von Erich was in the ring. And the argument from the Von Erichs is that since it was Bad Street USA rules, tags were sort of inadmissible, so it didn't really matter if there was a legal guy in the match because DQs don't count. And it's actually a valid case for both parties if you really want to argue it. So when we see the footage, they show the last several minutes where Kevin made the tag to Fritz, and while all 6 guys are in there, Fritz has the double iron claw on Hayes and Roberts. Bodies start flying all over the place shortly thereafter. And with all the pandemonium and breakdown in communication going on, the actual finish is Kevin coming off the top rope with a flying crossbody and getting the pin on, I think it was Buddy Roberts. Like I said, there was a lot of shit happening. It was hard to keep track of. But the ruling... Actually, I need to back up for a minute here. There was an iconic moment that took place here. I don't remember the guy's name, the NWA representative they had make the decision here. His name was on the screen for a minute, but I forgot to write it down, so it's not coming to mind. In any case, he's going over the whole rigmarole, talking about how he's viewed the footage and he wanted to make sure that when he made a decision that it was fair and accurate in the case that anybody tried to provoke him with false information. And it's great. Right as he gets to the line about people presenting him with misinformation, he slowly turns his head to the right, glares a fucking hole right through Michael Hayes. And Hayes' expression changes from cocky smile to an immediate humbling frown. It was so perfect. I can't do it justice in trying to explain it. If there's an edition of this out on YouTube somewhere, I highly recommend people go out of the way to watch it. I went back and rewatched it like 5 times. I couldn't stop laughing. The layers of comedy in that moment. But, well, sad news for the Von Erichs, and the Freebirds for that matter. I'm still trying to wrap my brain around this whole convoluted ruling. It was explained relatively well, but there was just a lot of information to unpack here. The conclusion from the NWA rep was, even though the match was anything goes, no DQ, aka there are no rules, well, that's not entirely accurate. Because there still had to be a legal framework with how the match was laid out and regulated. So in other words, a no DQ, no rules, anything goes match that is not actually no rules because reasons. It was weird. I'm not entirely sure how they went about flim-flamming their way out of this explanation, but the point is, the belts are being held up. The Von Erichs and the Freebirds have already signed for another match, so the next time they wrestle, that will determine who the real champs are. So if you still aren't already sick of the Von Erichs Freebirds matches, get ready for another one. But this time it counts. Right. We'll just keep telling ourselves that. We also had a recommendation from Mr. NWA representative here. In order to assure that we have a winner in this upcoming title match, he is recommending that all 6 men be in the ring at the same time. Let me repeat that. All 6 men in the ring at the same time. That was his proposal to ensure that no shenanigans or fuckery went down. Let's just have everybody in the ring at the same time doing a bunch of chaotic shit that the refs won't be able to keep track of. Yeah. That sounds like it won't end in utter catastrophe. Let's do it. Who was this guy again? Can somebody try to look his name up? Because if this man was an NWA representative making decisions to sanction matches, I hope it didn't last long, because he sucked at his job. But, well, maybe those teams will play by the rules this time. We've gone from anything goes, Bad Street USA, no holds barred, to standard 6-man tag with rules and regulations. Is Tony Khan booking this shit? That's some backwards booking if I've ever seen it. But moving on here, it is time for a Dallas Classic. The old-fashioned penalty box match. Heck yeah. I believe we reviewed one of these on World Class TV before. I believe with these same guys. Or at least some random combination of the Von Erichs and the Freebirds. David was probably in the other one. This one was a little different. We had Kevin Von Erich and Chris Adams versus Terry Gordy and Jimmy Garvin. I have to keep reminding myself that Jimmy Garvin is still a heel on these shows in 1984. I mean, he's a babyface right now in Crockett Promotions in 87, but he's still a heel in 84 here in World Class. It's a bit of a mindfuckery. So anyway, this got a decent length of TV time. Not as long as the one we reviewed way back in the summer of like 83. It's been a while since we covered the stipulations of the penalty box match. Basically, if a wrestler breaks a rule or disobeys the official, he gets 1 minute in the cage, and if it happens on multiple occasions, they kind of lengthen and stack the time for a little bit longer. Although I don't think they ever really enforced that here. You have one cage in each team's opposing corner, one for the heels, one for the faces. And the cool thing about this is that it makes for some interesting handicap scenarios when you got one guy in the box. Like Kevin got busted early on for trying to get in the ring illegally while Gordy was working over Adams. So while he's in the shark cage, the heels can spend more time working over Adams and getting the heat on him. It's not as exciting when it's the other way around, but the crowd is usually more lively and cheering for the faces to hurry up and take the match home whenever the heel's in the cage. I also liked seeing Precious out there running interference. And when Bronco busted her, he made her sit in the penalty box for a minute. It seemed fair to me. For the record, I was not actually keeping tabs on whether or not they were going the full minute with the penalty box gimmick, but it seemed like it was close enough. Probably my favorite spot with the box gimmick was the part where Jimmy went over to mock Adams while he was trapped in the cage. Meanwhile, Garvin literally just got out of the penalty box like 3 seconds prior. But he had to go over to admonish Adams. What a dick. The wrestling here was generally fine. I know I'm not being too specific on the spots. I mean, the shark cage was kind of the main drawing point. It is kind of funny, too. You see guys constantly going in and out of the box, faces and heels alike. That's when I realized, damn, there's a lot of cheating that goes on in tag team wrestling. If you factor in the amount of illegal moves and things guys do in regularly sanctioned tag matches, it really comes to fruition whenever you get a penalty box involved. But, anyway, let's talk about the finish, because this is fucking awesome. Okay, so Garvin gets busted for using the ropes illegally to choke out Kevin. So Bronco gives him the boot and sends him out to the floor. David Manning, also on the floor, grabs Garvin by the trunks, and I believe his exact quote was, "Get your ass in there." So Garvin's in the penalty box, and, things are happening in the ring. And all of a sudden, you see about half the crowd leap to their feet and begin loudly screaming and cheering. And at that point, I thought, oh no, it's about to go down. And boy, did shit hit the fan for poor Jimmy in a hurry. This is so amazing. Here comes Stella Mae French. All 5'3", 110 pounds of her. And she's going right after Garvin in the fucking shark cage. She's reaching through the bars, grabbing at his hair, kicking and shaking the cage. I mean, she literally looks like a human gorilla out there, rattling this thing back and forth. Garvin's in there covering up for his life and screaming, "Get her away from me! Get her out of here!" You have never seen a man so frightened of an elderly woman in your entire life. And of course, I'm dying the whole time this is happening. Stella looked like she was having a ball out there. And it gets 10 times better at the moment David Manning looks up at the timekeeper and goes, "Oh, the time limit's up? All right, Jimmy, you're free to go." And he tries to unlock the cage door. And Jimmy Garvin says, "No, fuck you. Close that shit." And it's a literal seesaw back and forth with David and Jimmy fighting over this cage door. Jimmy is trying with every fiber of his being to fend off Stella and David on the other side of this fucking door. And at the moment Stella manages to break Garvin's grip, it flies open, and here comes Stella with fists of fury. And of course the fans are all egging her on. She's delivering these brutal, stiff-looking shots right to Garvin's head. And Garvin's in there trying to cover up with like barely any room to throw his arms or hands up. Finally, as Stella is being escorted out of the ring by security, Garvin gets out of the cage, realizing that the coast is now clear, relatively unscathed somehow. Stella Mae, she didn't get all of Jimmy, but she got enough to give the fans something to latch on to. And of course, we get the classic heat finish. While Stella breaks free from security, she tries to make a beeline back to the ring again, and you got Bronco distracted trying to fend her off. Somehow, Kevin wound back up in the shark cage again. I don't know how, I wasn't really paying attention. But that basically left Adams in there by himself. So while Bronco had his back turned, Precious put a chair on the second turnbuckle so Garvin could throw Adams face first into it. And then he pinned him. It was a lot of fun. especially when all the Stella Mae French stuff started going down. I mean, you kind of figured she was going to end up factoring into this somehow, especially when you had Garvin completely unable to defend himself inside the cage. And here's this fucking crazy, wild Southern Belle coming down with fists of rage. I mean, I'm shocked she didn't try to back her 18-wheeler down the aisleway and run over the shark cage her fucking self. Casualties? Who cares about them? Stella Mae French doesn't care. So, yeah, this is a 5-star match. No. More like a 3-star match with a 5-star finish. It's one of the best stories they've got going on with the TV show right now. Stella Mae French looking for every possible opportunity to get her hands on Jimmy Garvin. One of the rare times in wrestling where you think to yourself, you know, I could totally buy this crazy loon bat beating up a grown man. You don't see it too often in wrestling, but when those moments arrive at your doorstep, you take your shot. This was so fantastic. And we even had a good TV main event to close things out this week. Gino Hernandez defending the American Heavyweight title against the Iceman King Parsons. Very solid quality TV match. It's the perfect villain and the perfect protagonist being paired together in singles action. You know, Gino's the cocky prick heel who likes to flash and showboat to the fans after he does something remotely impressive. You know, the Iceman's just buying his time, waiting to catch Gino off guard and outclass him. You know, they did some fun spots to keep things interesting. They did a Greco-Roman knuckle lock tie-up early on where Gino was able to bring the Iceman toward the corner buckle, and the Iceman did the rope walk spot into the arm drag that looked kind of neat. And, of course, they do that same spot a couple seconds later with the roles reversed. So this time when Gino tries to go up top for the rope walk, the Iceman just crotches him, and Gino sells it perfectly. Mercer chalked it up to Gino trying to walk off the pain. I can assure you, there's not a man in this world that could have walked off that kind of pain. That was about one step away from inadvertent vasectomy. Meanwhile, after Gino had his gonads rearranged, the Iceman kept the punishment going, and Gino got to cut off the Iceman momentarily, but once Parsons began firing back, that is when Skandar Akbar and his posse hit the ring for the disqualification. Run-ins from the former Super Ds, now just the Irwin brothers, Scott and Bill. And, Bill whipped the Iceman with his bull rope for a few seconds until some of the middle card babyfaces hit the ring to send them powdering. Iceman doing his best to cover up and make sure Irwin didn't catch him in the face with that bull rope. Very smart move. And that's kind of all there was to it. It was a vast improvement from last week's show, that is for sure. I mean, take out the missing link in the opener, which was only like 5 minutes anyway. The show had its standout moments. The conference room deal with the Freebirds and the Von Erichs, Jimmy Garvin getting his ass kicked by Stella Mae French again. That never gets old. You know, even the main event was solid for the 8 or so minutes it got. Gino Hernandez, man, he's such an underrated talent. I wish he would get more notoriety for the great heel work he did throughout his career. He doesn't get enough credit. It's a lot of juggling parts they've got maneuvering around right now. You know, the Freebirds Von Erich stuff is still the central focus of everything, but, you know, the undercard, they got some new faces arriving on the scene. They're kind of rearranging the card a little bit, so they got some stuff going on. It's not quite the downfall period yet, so we will enjoy the moments while we can. But here's your retro breakdown for this week. And looking ahead of my notes here, let's see what we got upcoming this weekend. Well, we got Retro Raw, we got SmackDown, got Collision, and we got this Forbidden Door show. Fuck, that's a lot of stuff. Yeah. Well, we'll see. I mean, the Forbidden Door, like I said, I'm only going to be touching on a couple matches. I guess I can briefly look at that card and see if there's anything else that I neglected to touch on when we were doing the AEW report. What the hell? That's a lot of matches, man. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Well, take out the pre-show match. That's 10 matches. Omega and Ospreay, I might watch it. I'll definitely watch Danielson and Okada. Sonata and Jungle Boy, fuck that match. MJF and Tanahashi, I might watch that one. Could be interesting. The 6-man tag with Jericho, Guevara, and Suzuki versus Sting, Darby, and the other guy to be announced. I'm not really interested in that. The 10-man tag with the Blackpool Combat Cucks. No thanks, I'm good. Punk and Kojima. I will watch that match. That's part of the opening round of the Owen Hart tournament. You know, again, I can't judge whether or not the match will be good before I see it, but it'll keep my attention. It's a Punk match, so I'm already invested. The 4-way for the international title, I'm more or less ambivalent about. Tony Storm and Willow Nightingale, I don't really care about that match. Adam Cole versus Tom Lawler. What? I mean, this is Wikipedia. It could be somebody ribbing. Is that actually happening? Adam Cole versus Tom Lawler? Who booked that match? Let's see. It says here, debuting star attacks Adam Cole. When? Where? Oh, Rampage. Of course. Yeah. The Friday show that nobody watches. Yeah, of course they were going to do it there. Wow. Wow. Okay. If you say so. Yeah, I don't know, dude. I mean, we go back and forth on the talk about Adam Cole being in believable-looking fights. They're putting him in the ring with an ex-UFC guy. Is that match even remotely competitive on paper? I mean, I know it's the wacky world of pro wrestling, but come on. Suspension of disbelief kind of goes out the window at that point. Especially when you look at Adam Cole's state of mind. I don't know. We'll see. That's all I'll say about that. Anyway, I guess we'll wrap things up because we've gone long anyway. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Catch you all on Monday, and I'll have some updates going on for what's going to happen the rest of the week. I'm going to be out of town. I don't think that'll affect my ability to upload things, but we'll see. It's only a couple days, but I should be back home to record everything by that Friday. So we'll probably be in good state. Anyway, take care. Thanks for watching. Peace out.